On behalf of our sponsors, the Clearwater Neighborhood Coalition, the City of Clearwater, and the Suncoast Sierra Club, we welcome you to the third Building Better Neighborhoods Conference. I am your moderator, Sheridan Boyle, the City of Clearwater Sustainability Coordinator. We love our city, and the purpose of the series of webinars is to support sustainable neighborhoods and improve the quality of life for our residents. Our topic this year is building better neighborhoods through home gardening and Florida-friendly landscaping. This topic is especially timely now due to our COVID-19 confinement. We know that many of you are considering ways to relieve stress and to make staying at home creative and productive, and gardening is a great way to do just that. We invite you now to sit back and listen to our experts. This conference, third in a series of 4, is being recorded and will be available at the City of Clearwater's website. To get there on the web, go to myclearwater.com/BBN, and I will repeat this at the end of the conference as well as have it spelled out on the screen for you. A few housekeeping reminders before we begin. You are all on attendee mode, which means you can't share your video or unmute yourselves. This is done to make sure today's webinar goes as smoothly as possible. However, we would absolutely love to answer your questions and have saved 10 minutes at the end of tonight's session to address them. To submit a question, please type it into the Q&A box. You will notice that you also have a chat feature, which you can use to express a thought. However, we will only be pulling questions from the Q&A box specifically, so make sure that's where you put your questions. After typing your question, be sure to hit the enter button to officially submit it. So tonight's topic, titled Where Does Your Garden Grow?, is all about the many ways you can grow food in Clearwater and the best tips for beginners to get started. We are very lucky to get to speak with 2 Clearwater gardening experts, Jochen Essig from Life Farms and Howard Warschauer from the Clearwater Garden Club. So we'll start with Howard. So Howard Warschauer founded and organized Clearwater Community Gardens in 2014 and served as the garden's president until this past summer. This garden is one of the largest and most successful community gardens in Tampa Bay. Gardeners were encouraged to express themselves through gardening, and the result was the establishment of a wide variety of growing methods. Howard was then elected president of the Clearwater Garden Club in April 2020. Now he and the Garden Club are presently in the process of establishing a balcony gardening course, which is available and incredibly valuable for Clearwater, as there are more than 5,000 families living in residences with balconies. We are very excited to have him on tonight's panel. And next is Jochen Essig. Jochen is farm manager at Life Farms, soon to be farm manager at Fat Feet Farms in Oldsmar, but is currently the farm manager at Life Farms in Clearwater. As a biologist and teacher, Jochen is also in charge of the educational programs at Life Farms. He's a public speaker and led workshops for gardening clubs, schools, and local companies. Jochen started his farm business in 2016 in Clearwater, Sonnen Garden Urban Farms, where he grew vegetables, wildflowers, and microgreens in his yard and in the yards of friends in the neighborhood. In 2018, Sonnengarten Farms and Life Farms merged to be able to build sustainable farm business for the future. Jochen's motivation to become an organic farmer is driven by his life goal to do the most he can do to protect nature. In his opinion, producing organically grown vegetables in your own yard is likely the most effective way to lower the negative impact on habitat destruction, pollution through agrochemicals, as well as your carbon dioxide footprint. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to tonight's discussion. So let's get started. So we have some questions that we've put together for each of you, and we'll just take turns, and then at the end we will get to questions from the audience. So the first question, I really love this question. Do I need 5 acres of land to grow food? Jochen, let's start with you on this one.
Actually, you need 6 acres because we have 6 acres in Life Farms, which is, of course, not.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Right. So no, that's a joke. You can start in a potting garden with 4-inch terracotta pots. You can grow on your patio. You can have a raised bed in your garden. You can even put that raised bed on your concrete driveway, it'll work anyways. So there are many options, many growing mediums, and really everything is possible. You can grow vegetables in many different ways, and it doesn't have to be a big farm with 3 or 5 acres. It can be less, and yeah, so that's my first answer.
Awesome. So 6 acres for live farms, but maybe a few feet if that's all you have.
Exactly.
Howard, what do you say to this question?
Absolutely agree with Joanne. You can grow almost anywhere and any time in Florida. It's one of the wonders about our growing. And I think that's a later question here, is when to grow in the time of the year. But it's just wide open in Florida, and you can grow in any size pot, any vegetables you want to grow and that you want to try. So it just depends where you live and what you have available to you. Don't let the size constrain you whatsoever. When we started the Clearwater Community Gardens, we have just 4 by 8 foot plots, and through our research and in the reading we did, we realized you could feed a family of 4 very nicely from just a 4 by 8 foot plot, with just about all the vegetables and other things that you can grow in the plot for the whole year. And you can grow in Florida all year round, which is wonderful too. So it's unlimited. The only limit is your mind.
Yeah, that is amazing. I think especially with raised beds, like people are so surprised how many plants you can actually like fit in that space and have them be productive as well. So
It really
awesome.
is.
Yeah, we love to get this question like addressed first and foremost so that people don't think that they're limited if they don't have access to vast amounts of land.
Exactly.
So for our second question, that leads us to, when is the best time to garden in Florida? So Howard, you kind of talked about our year-round growing season already. I'll start with you on this question.
It really is a year-round growing season. Of course, at different times of year, you will be growing different things in the garden, and they will take longer in the winter than the summer. A lot of the plants, they'll grow much faster in the summertime. But you're so unlimited in things you could grow. Of course, you have some heat constraints for things and some shade constraints and things like that. But even the things you couldn't grow years ago are now being grown, and they've changed the ways that they get the seeds, and you can grow things we never could grow here in the South years ago, and now they're available to you. Some types of tomatoes and all the vegetables. The colleges that do work on that have come up with seeds and plants and strains that will grow, in the middle of the summer. So again, it's unlimited here in Florida. We really have a growing paradise.
Johan, what do you think about this question?
It's a good question, and I just go from our growing season at the farm, and we start with our season in October with the first greens, with arugula in the field, with the first lettuces, all the traditional vegetables from the store. You can grow them in Florida in the fall, in the winter time, and in spring. Summer is different, but there are also recommendations for summer vegetables. We grow sweet potatoes in the summer, so I can highly recommend to grow sweet potatoes. You can not only eat the tubers then in fall, you can also eat the sweet potato greens, which is a nice summer green. Another thing are the tropical spinaches. So I'm thinking about a Malabar spinach, Okinawa spinach, longevity spinach, and so on. These are all not real spinaches, but very similar to a spinach. So also gourds like chayote or loofah are really interesting, and they show a higher resistance against the melon worm, which is a real problem here. and they're better suited for that. And then amaranth, Callaloo amaranth is a nice one, really prolific producer of greens for the summer then.
Yeah, you brought up so many good talking points. I can't remember which one I want to get to first. So I think you bring up an excellent point that a lot of people, when they grow up in the north and then they move down to Florida, they get into this mode, or they're in this mode of summer is the time to garden. And then they try some of the crops that they would try up north and they don't have any luck. And it's because our summers are really intense. And while we do have a year-round growing season, some things are better in summer than others. So Johan, I have tried the Malabar spinach and amaranth and had a ton of luck with it. So those are excellent recommendations for that.
We grew a lot of Malabar spinach at the community garden, and it grows so well.
Yeah, and Howard, the community garden there too has the perfect setup between like sunlight and some shade from the oak trees. So I imagine in the summertime that shade from the oak trees really benefits some of the vegetables that can be grown.
Absolutely. There's 2 rows out of the 5 that get shaded in the summertime, and they're very sought after.
That's awesome. So let's see here. Our next question is, okay, can you define organic gardening? Johan, do you want to take this one?
Yes. Well, it's a simple answer. It's actually gardening or farming without synthetic fertilizer or pesticides. So that's probably the shortest form to fit in. And then if you go by the definition of the USDA, then you get a little bit more, because as a farm, if you want to, have an organic farm, you have to follow specific guidelines, and you can use only specific products in your production. So it gets a little bit more into detail, a little bit more specific. But for the garden, no synthetic fertilizer or pesticides. I'd like to extend that term a little bit, because it's not only my passion. I think it's important to include what's also in your yard. So I like the term ecological gardening very much. So you should combine your garden with native plants. Try to attract beneficial insects. Try to attract predatory insects that, if you have pest problems, eat your pests, eat your melon worms that I just mentioned. So I think that's really important to include, to see the big picture. And I know sometimes you see a super fine lawn which has then one raised bed on it. So I think that's not it. That can't be it. That's nice. That's a nice first try, but try to limit the size of your lawn. Don't even think about any pesticides. Try to have your garden as natural as possible.
Yeah, I think that's you really expanded on that definition, being beyond just like chemical usage to a more holistic approach to like gardening the way nature would. Really great recommendations. Howard, do you have anything to add to that? Any more thoughts?
Yeah, just as an example, when we started the community garden, we had 2 gals that were very into organic gardening, and we were very lucky to have them. And what we did was each raised bed was layered. It was a layered approach to creating a composted soil, basically, and it worked so well. We ended up with just wonderful gardens and growth over a period of 2 years, because it took time for it to break down. There was layers of brown and green, you call it, when you're composting, and we did each of the 4x8 raised beds that way, and it was a wonderful result. So you can do that right from the beginning, creating your own. Those of you interested in doing raised bed gardening, even in your backyard. A lot of people doing that because of our sandy soil. You do have to adapt that to be a soil that's good for growing. So you can do it in a raised bed method and end up with a wonderful organic soil.
I'm really glad you also brought that up, because soil and like the quality of soil that you have, it can determine so much for plant health, and then, you know, for the different problems that your plants might encounter, you know, as they grow. So often making sure that you're growing in the best soil can really prevent you from even needing to address like pests or other like diseases. So it really does start at the base there.
And
Great point.
was that last week's
So
presentation?
Amanda, actually, that was week 1.
Week 1, okay.
So Amanda Streets with Living Roots Eco Design, she talked about like soil health, and we learned a lot there too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I was reflecting on that. So for our, let's see, is it stuck? There we go. For our next question, what is the easiest crop for beginners to try to grow? Howard, would you like to start?
Sure. Things that work well here in Florida for beginners are, of course, tomatoes. That's one of your easiest plants. They grow very well. They seem to everybody had tomatoes in our raised beds. And trying to think of the things that we grew the easiest in reality at the community garden. Peppers.
Mm-hmm.
We had lots of peppers. Beans seem to grow well. Your basic vegetables when you think of it. We had one of our gardeners grew hot peppers, and he used to make a sauce out of it, and pepper sauce. And he had his entire raised bed was all hot peppers, and they grew wonderfully.
Yeah.
So that's also a good crop.
That's awesome. Peppers would be a great summer recommendation as well.
Yeah.
Those hot peppers.
Grows well in the summertime.
When do you find, so I know that sometimes when people go to like a big box store, like Lowe's or Home Depot, they sometimes are wanting to start tomatoes, but it's not often at the best time of year. When do you all, like Howard, at the garden, when did you find that tomatoes were best to be started?
We had the cherry tomatoes like Florida Sun. They seem to grow very well all through the summer. There's certain varieties. And now there's even varieties of the larger tomatoes that have been trained to grow in our Florida Sun. They've been developed that way. And so you do have some options and choices. But like you said, the, what was that? Spinach,
Malabar.
Malabar, that seems to grow now. That seems to like the summertime. From my recollection, there was tons of it growing in the community garden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Johan, what would you say the easiest crop for beginners to try and grow is?
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest crops is something that you can direct seed in your bed, and I like radishes. It's something you find probably in every German community garden or backyard garden, and arugula as well. You can direct seed them. That makes it easier. It's just one step. You prepare your bed, and then you just put your seeds in. And these two things I would recommend. But from the tomatoes, right now we are planting. Tomorrow I will plant one of my last tomatoes in a greenhouse for the season. So they take 100 days from seed to harvest, and they have already a couple of weeks in the greenhouse. So in maybe 4 weeks or so, we will see tomatoes from these plantings. And then I hopefully get a couple months out of these plants. So that's with the tomatoes. And one variety that grows well are the Everglades tomatoes. It's a Florida native, I think. And that's something that's really easy to grow. And like Howard said, the cherry tomatoes are probably the one I would recommend for beginners first, because they grow faster and have a little bit of a higher resistance against diseases. Towards the summer then, like what we talked a couple times before, these spinaches, I just found seedlings of Malabar spinach, germinated little seedlings in the area where we sometimes grow it. And I save these seedlings and repot them And then when it's warm enough, I replant them at the spot where I need them. One interesting plant, which is actually more like a shrub, is Cassava, a starchy root, which is easy to grow because you can grow it from a cutting, and you can stick that cutting in the soil, in sandy soil, in dry soil, it doesn't matter. And then after a half a year, a little bit longer, you have your tubers then in the ground.
Yeah, great point. I have cassava, and it is that simple. I literally, the bush tells you when it's time for harvest, right? Because the leaves start to die back a little bit. You pull it up, and I just take a branch, cut it, and I put it in the ground. And it, like 9 times out of 10, it's gonna form into another shrub.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
The root itself takes a little bit of preparation work, but it's like really tasty if you prepare it well.
Yeah.
You also had a great point with tomatoes too. One thing I told myself last year is I wrote a note to myself and I said, start your tomatoes in February, because I always start my tomatoes too late. And for some reason, I have an issue with them as it gets too hot and too rainy. I start to get some diseases. I think it's mostly sometimes when it rains and the soil splashes back up on leaves, it can cause a little bit of, I don't know if it's a bacteria or a mold. So if I start them now, I've been able to kind of get away from that. And I do have Everglades tomato, and I do believe it's native as well. And it's really, they're really good. They're like smaller than cherry tomatoes, but
pretty small.
Yeah, really nice. So awesome. So moving on to question 6, I really love this question. I think it's probably the most beneficial for anyone who's wanting to get into gardening for 2 reasons. 1, our mistakes are often the greatest learning lesson. And 2, it helps show like new gardeners that even the most advanced or experienced gardeners have those stories of something not going well. So for this question, we asked, did you have a learning lesson, mistake, or challenge in your gardening experience? Jochen, let's start with you.
Yes, that's part of the game. So I have 2 examples. When I started with an urban farm, I decided I want to grow a lot of greens, but I also wanted to have some kind of vegetables. So I tried squash, summer squash, zucchini, and I had beautiful seedlings. Everything worked fine. They looked healthy. I planted them in the right time, and they got eaten in no time by hundreds of little worms, hundreds of little caterpillars, which I later found out is the squash or melon worm. And I could not do it, not in my setting. And I decided I won't waste any time here. I didn't want to use organic pesticides. I didn't want to spray anything. I just did it by hand, and they were more. I had no chance. So I decided, nope, I won't grow these at my house. This was the one challenge I lost. And then I started also to grow microgreens, which is something indoor. You grow it usually indoors. And my first trials, they weren't nearly as good as in this description and books that I read about it. So I almost gave up, and now it's one of my favorite things that I grow different kinds of microgreens, and I get the yield. I know when to cut it. I know every step, but it took me a month to find out how it works.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good lesson in not giving up. I have to say though, I did the same thing with squash and melons in the summer. I have personally given up on them because I also have the melon worm. And I know some people in the area that do excellent. I just have not been one of them. And try as I might, sometimes, you know, I've even tried like individually checking the leaves twice a day to pull the worm, it's a caterpillar, but to pull the caterpillar off, and I still always lose the plant. So
we at the farm now, we planted squash actually in a time that is not recommended. So we planted it in December, and it worked. So we have right now, we have squash to sell, and we planted it outside, not in the greenhouse, outside. And this was really surprising to us. It was cold, but there's no damage and nothing. And we have, so far for this season, so far the best squash.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll write myself a second note now and to try and start squash in December then. So Howard, do you have an example of a learning lesson, mistake, or challenge that you've experienced in the garden?
I can honestly say that my entire gardening experience has been a learning lesson and a challenge. When I started gardening here in Florida, anyway, I came to the community garden back in 2014, so 7 years ago now, and I approached it from the organizational side. Because I've always had trouble gardening. Most of my gardening has been a challenge. I think the worst time I've had over the years was nematodes and tomatoes. I struggled for years before I found out that you can actually deal with the nematodes and do away with them. But I was, I guess, stubborn enough where I didn't reach out, which kind of goes into the next question, the recommended resources, because reaching out to other gardeners is the easiest and most useful thing you can do in gardening. Gardeners love to talk. They love to tell you their experiences. And so before I learned that, I had lots of challenges in the gardening arena. But I think the tomatoes and the nematodes was probably my biggest challenge and learning lesson.
Yeah, I think too, you know, especially when you're trying to garden in the ground, like a lot of people are familiar with like the fact that Florida has an interesting nematode situation. For my papaya tree, when I was trying papaya trees in my backyard, I kept losing them and I did not know why. And every single one would just fall over and I would have no root system at the bottom. And it wasn't until I realized that it was probably nematodes. And once I started heavily applying compost, I now have a papaya tree that for the last 2 years has produced almost year round. So I really like that experiment, like not giving up and then reaching out when you're about to give up.
Yeah.
Because if I hadn't asked, I would have foregone papayas. It would have been very sad. So Howard, that's a perfect segue into question 7. So I'll start with you on this one then.
Yeah.
What are your top recommended resources for new gardeners?
And that is the truth. You can go to a community garden. That we have them all over the area now. Many of them. There'll be gardeners there, or find out when they're having their meetings and meet gardeners at the community garden. They love talking. Excuse me. And you'll get just wonderful. Excuse me. You'll get wonderful insight into how to grow in Florida, in the area that you live. It's one of the best resources you can come across. And I've found that wherever you go and there's a group of gardeners, you'll hear noisy people because they love to talk about gardening. So that's the best thing I can recommend as far as a resource for new gardeners.
That's great. I love community gardens and gardening people in general because of the two things. They always give you knowledge and plants.
Yes, free plants.
Yes. And I had a similar experience with joining a community garden here in Oldsmar. I learned so much from people. They weren't even master gardeners. And I actually learned just as much from the new gardeners as I did from the really advanced ones. Because I found that the new gardeners were the ones trying like things that either weren't recommended or like weren't thought of, or just like that things that the experienced gardeners didn't necessarily think of because they were so advanced in their own ways. And it was really cool to see the sharing of knowledge and experience across the different experiences. So Jochen, what would you say your top recommended resources are?
Right, I totally agree with Howard. Local community gardens and local farms are really the source you should go for, because like Howard said, we like to share our experience and our knowledge. And yeah, we had these trials and errors already, so you don't have to do the same the same thing that we did, so you can learn from us. I have two more recommendations. University of Florida has a vegetable gardening guide, IFAS Florida Vegetable Gardening Guide. It's online. You can download it then as a PDF document. It's really good. We look in that document, I mean, every other week or so. We check really, are we on track here? Does that work? They have recommendations there about varieties, about the seasonality, about possible pest problems, and so on. That's really good. And then I want to recommend one author, Elliot Coleman. He wrote a couple of books. The New Organic Grower is probably the most popular one. So Elliot Coleman is a really good source to learn about organic gardening.
Johan, could you spell his last name or their last name?
Yeah, Coleman is Coleman.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure, because that's a great, anytime you can give a specific example, that's a really great resource. And then Howard, would you share the Clearwater Community Garden address?
Sure, it's 1277 Grove Street.
1277 Grove Street. And then if people were interested in joining the garden club, can they?
Absolutely.
How do they do that?
Go to our website, which is clearwatergardenclub.com.
Okay, I'm going to write that out.
Thank you.
That's an immensely valuable resource.
And we also sell masks that we make, one of our members makes, beautiful masks. And we also have membership coming up soon, like you said, about the balcony gardening, which if you join the club, you get the balcony gardening course for free.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really going to be so useful. I didn't know that 5,000.
I do have some photos if we
have. Oh yeah,
go have any time?
Ahead. Yes, absolutely, we have time. So Howard's going to share some photos. I'm going to stop my share, and then Howard, I'm going to give you the ability. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, how do I do that?
So you should
share screen. Okay,
yeah.
There we go. And maybe I can figure that out. Here we go. Okay, so that's shared now, right? Can you see that?
Not yet.
No? Share screen. Yeah. Guess we should have taken a different lesson.
You can always email me it, and I can pull it up with my own, and we can get to some questions in the meantime. And then, so Howard, if you email me that now, I'll pull it up, but we can, in the meantime, get to some questions then. So let's do this. Awesome. So we're back here. Oops. So let's go ahead and get to questions from the audience. We have some really great ones already listed. So let's see here. Oh, Johan, I think this is going to be a great one for you to answer. Chris Walker is asking, what is the best sun to shade ratio for a vegetable bed?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, depends a little bit on the vegetables you want to grow. If you want to grow nightshades, in particular tomatoes or eggplants, you need, I would say, about 6 hours direct sun. You need a lot of sun to get a lot of tomatoes. So this is one that needs the most sun, right? If you want to grow the arugula that I mentioned, you can grow them in part shade under a tree, for example, or with sun in the morning and then afternoon no sun, or vice versa. So that's an example where you don't need so much sun and then you still get a crop, you know, like leafy greens, you can have something with less sun, that's fine.
That's a great one. Howard, do you have any thoughts, or you said, yes, that sounds great?
I think that sounds great.
I have Margaret asking about the use of biochar. She says she's ordered some after viewing an informative documentary, and she put it into her raised garden bed, but she's not sure it made a lot of difference. She does compost and incorporate that also into her soil. Do you guys have any experience or recommendations for biochar, or can you explain what it is if you do know?
I don't know what it is. I know they're using it at the community garden now, and they're mixing it in with the composted soil.
Johan, do you have any
They
experience with
like it a
biochar?
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I was interested in it as well for a while. When I started with my urban farm in my, I think, second year, I found articles about it, and it was more visible in media and so on. And I think it was some kind of tropical soil they found, and they found layers of char in that soil, and tropical soils are naturally not rich in nutrients. So this was a way to actually hold the nutrients in place with that biochar, which is a substrate then that's has a lot of pores, and not only microorganisms but also nutrient molecules can then bind to that biochar, and they don't get washed out. And since we have these strong rain events, that's something that's interesting in areas where you have these almost tropical rains. I had similar experience, but I didn't spend too much time with it. I didn't see a big difference, but I think when it's done right, it makes a difference for your yard. And if you can buy it now as a product and it's not too expensive, then why not?
Yeah, thank you for that breakdown of what it is. And maybe it might be just that there's not enough time that has passed to actually, or maybe the quantity to actually see the benefits of it. Right. But Margaret, it's great that you're adding compost as well. Liz is asking, how do you manage rats which can go from the garden to the house? Have you all had any experiences with rats, or any issues that they might bring from a garden?
I haven't.
This is actually one that I've gotten a lot of questions on, which I haven't experienced personally, but I know for some people, they fear that growing any kind of food around the house, whether it's fruit or vegetables, might attract certain animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you said see it holistically. So if your yard has enough habitats for native snakes, for example, there's a snake called red snake, by the way, it's less likely that you have a problem with rats, for example. And if you really like your fruits on your fruit tree, then you harvest them before the rats get them. You know, the papaya, for example, when you harvest them when it's only 30% yellow, which is a good thing already, then the rat is not interested, because for them it's not sweet enough, not ripe enough. So that's just one thing, you know, to think of.
Yeah, I think that, so an ounce of prevention can go a long way. I actually do that with my papayas, but it's more because if I wait, the squirrels will definitely take the opportunity.
Same thing, yes.
Yes. So, Johan, you talked about cassava earlier, and we have a question that says, how long before you can harvest cassava?
Honestly, I don't know what would be the shortest time, because we have it at the farm. We had it at the farm actually, and they were in the ground for a little bit longer. And then we had it as a seasonal summer crop, because in the summer you can't sell so much from a farm, and we'd like to have something in our web store. And then we had these things. Maybe Howard knows more, but I think it's at least 6 months, maybe to a year.
Yeah.
Howard, do you have any experience with cassava?
I do not.
Okay. I would agree with that. I haven't ever timed mine out, but I would say definitely less than a year, but over 6 months. And I can tell by the leaves like start to turn brown rather than green. And that's generally when I know to pull up the roots.
That's good.
Okay, another question from Liz. Where can you buy organic herbs and seedlings to plant in your own garden? Howard, do you have any experience, say someone didn't want to start from seed and they wanted to buy seedlings? Where would you
The community garden has a sale or two every year, and they grow them from seed at at the community garden.
Okay, great.
I believe they're having one this summer. They're going to be ready to have another one.
Great. And that's an extensive, like you
They
guys sell a
usually have
lot of
500,
plants.
600 plants. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And then do you all have, or does the garden have a Facebook page? How would someone know if a plant sale is coming up?
They do have a Facebook page,
Okay,
Clearwater Community Gardens. Just
on
type
Facebook.
it. I probably at Clearwater Community Gardens.
Okay.
Get you there.
And then Johan, do you have any recommendations if someone wanted to buy like organic seedlings for starters?
Of course, yes. So at Live Farms, we have a farm store on the website, and the website is livefarms.net. And on that website, you see all the different items we sell, and we just started with selling lettuce seedlings. So you get like, I don't know, like 6 to 8 different kinds of lettuce seedlings in a small tray with 10 seedlings. And that's a good start. So from there, and right now we produce enough. It's more difficult for us when the season starts because we have to plant everything, but now we have some extra. So we were not set up to sell a lot of seedlings, but when we have them, then we can sell them. And you can always ask us or write us an email or come by at the farm here in Clearwater. And I also actually sold today to a local nursery. It's Heiner's Nursery, also in Clearwater, and they are reselling our seedlings.
Okay.
Nice.
Awesome.
Oh, we'll also have a sale at the Garden Club. We're scheduled to have one in May for Mother's Day. So that'll be coming up, and we usually get about 100 or so plants from the community garden. So we'll have those at that time.
Awesome.
Look at our website, and we'll be announcing it there if we're going to have it.
Perfect. And I put the website for the Clearwater Clearwater Garden Club in the chat if anyone wants to see it. And this really leads to another great question. So in my experience too, in trying to figure out what's good to grow at what point in the year, sometimes it can be misleading when you go to a store like Lowe's or Home Depot because they have everything available. And it's not always, at the right season for Florida. It's just what they've decided to, possibly countrywide to put out at that time of year. So when going to a big box store like Lowe's, how can you tell what is easily good for Florida's environment?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I have a possible answer if no one wants to take it up. So one of my, and I wish I had a direct link to it, but you could probably look it up. UFIFAS, UFIFAS has a wonderful calendar, and I think it's called like What to Grow and When to Grow It. So you can look up UFIFAS When to Grow calendar, and for each month it breaks it down into what you should be growing or starting in both South, Central, and North Florida. So it divides up the state because South Florida is going to be different than North Florida in our growing seasons. And this, in my experience, has been the best resource. So rather than going to Lowe's, which wants to sell you plants, even though they might not be the right time of year, you can already have in mind like what you want to buy. So whether you go to a smaller mom and pop, fully organic seedling place or to Lowe's, you'll know what what's best. I will say if you go to a mom and pop organic seedling place, they're going to be starting what's appropriate to grow at that point in year, rather than because that's just, they're not mass producing plants like a big box store is. So seeing what other gardeners grow is a great thing to do, but then also looking at those online resources for Florida is really, really great.
Also, from the experience that we've had over the years at the community garden, if you go visit and talk to the manager there, he can tell you what's grown well and what seasons right off the top of his head.
Yeah, thank you. Bill is an amazing resource. You will learn so much and maybe leave with a plant.
Very true.
Chris Walker is asking, actually I might ask our biologist this. Jochen, can you explain what a nematode is?
Well, in general, nematodes are not necessarily just bad,
Mm-hmm.
worms. It's actually a very large group of animals, and there are probably as many beneficials as parasitic nematodes on the planet. And it's a group that's not entirely, by systematics and taxonomists is entirely discovered. There's still a lot of things they have to work on, but of course, the root knot nematode is probably in farming and gardening the most well-known, and that's one that's considered a parasite, and that's one that destroys or deforms the roots, so that the uptake of nutrients is limited. What you did with your papaya tree is something that's we recommend as well, and what's really good. Work with compost, work with organic matter, because there's a lot of predator-prey relationships in the soil, and if you bring life to your soil in form of compost, and you bring in more predators and more competitors, the impact of these nematodes, the root knot nematodes, is not as strong, and also nutrients are easier available for your plant when there are more, microorganisms that help to make nutrients available. Then even a plant with, at the end of the growing cycle, you see so many root knots from these nematodes, but still you had a huge tomato plant, you had a wonderful beet or something. It doesn't matter then,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great explanation. I really love that you point out we don't necessarily have a nematode problem. We have a nematode like imbalance too, where certain species aren't kept in check by other species as well. So,
yeah.
Could you, Jochen, say the address of Life Farms? We have someone who's asking.
The physical address?
Yes.
Yeah, it's here in Clearwater, and it's on Woodring Drive. So it's very close to Sunset Point Road, and it's 2901 Woodring Drive in Clearwater, 33759.
And for people who are interested, I know that sometimes Life Farms has like educational events. Should they just follow, do you have any social media pages, or where can people go to find out more about that?
Exactly. So you can find us on Facebook and also Instagram, and you can join our newsletter, which is just from the website. You can just leave your email address on, on that box, and then you will be included to our newsletter.
Awesome. And I'm on the newsletter, and it's very informative.
Mm-hmm.
And then for that physical address, Life Farms, is it something that someone can just show up to, or should people make sure to come when it's like a either an appointment or a actual scheduled event?
Yes, so we are not open to the public every day. Right now, it works best actually when you write us an email if you have a specific question. But we also like to sell through our online store. So Friday, Saturday, and Monday are the pickup days for our online store customers, and you can order every week when you want, if you want. And you can then also just, park your car, and, we can chat, and we can answer specific questions about gardening or farming.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I know we talked about seedlings and starters. Do you all have any preferred places to go and get seeds?
Yes.
Johan, where do you go, like personally, to get your seeds?
So there are a couple companies, and they're all well known for farmers, for gardeners. I like Johnny's Selected Seeds. They have, in my opinion, the best quality. It's faster shipping than other ones. And I have to say they had some shortages this year because COVID started.
Everyone did. Yeah.
Something that was quite amazing. And, I represent a farm now, and I will represent another farm, but I encourage everybody, every one of our clients and everybody who's listening, start your own garden, start your own farm, buy your own seeds, and try it out. You will not only grow and harvest your own vegetables, you will also appreciate what local farmers do, because you will see some things are a little bit more difficult, and that's then what we sell, you know, and you will still can buy from us locally. But Johnny's is a good one. And then there's another company I really like is Fedco, Fedco, and I like specifically because they have cute little seed packages, Southern Seed Exposure, and they have a nice catalog. So it's a good company, especially for gardeners.
Awesome. And Howard, do you have any recommendations for seeds?
I don't for seeds, but I like Wilcox, our local organic growing for seedlings. They have a very good selection there. Seeds I'm not that familiar with.
I think Wilcox has a rack with seeds, vegetable seeds, local seeds.
Yes.
Seeds.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, Wilcox is an amazing resource for both native plants, and then they have that section for edible plants as well. So that's a really great plug in there. And then I think one of the last questions that we're going to be able to get to, someone is asking, do either of you have experience with seed collection? So say you grow your plants and then you want to be able to grow that the next season. How would one go about like collecting seeds?
Talk to Bill. They
Talk
do
to Bill.
it in the community garden all the time.
We need a hat that says when in doubt, talk to Bill. Okay, so talk to Bill at the Clearwater Community Garden. Or Johan, do you have any advice? Or it might be plant specific.
Yeah, I mean, I grew for a while a lot of different heirloom varieties, heirloom tomato varieties back in Germany. And heirloom means these are not hybrid varieties, because hybrid is a little bit more difficult. If you collect the seeds from a hybrid variety, and a lot of farmers grow hybrid varieties, it's not a bad thing. It's nothing with GMO. It's just a specific effect that actually leads to a stronger plant with more leaves or more flowers and then more fruits. But if you take the seeds from that specific plant, the next generation is kind of the opposite. It's a small plant with not a lot of leaves, and the fruits aren't. So you don't want to grow these seeds. So you have to know from which varieties you can collect your seeds and then save these seeds. So if you have heirloom tomatoes, you have to collect the seeds because they're expensive to buy, and then you can grow your own, always from the same seeds. And then from the things we talked about, like these spinaches and all that stuff, or that's great. I mean, save these seeds, and then you never have to buy them again.
Yeah, that's great advice. I didn't know that with hybrids. So and just to build on that, to explain, so hybrids are basically like two genetic lineages of the same species crossing. Right?
Yes, they're slightly, very close. They're slightly differences. So one has, for example, has the big leaves, and the other one has some kind of, resistance against the heat. And they try to combine them, and then the so-called heterosis effect, only in this generation then brings out a beautiful plant, a stronger plant with just more fruits or more leaves, whatever you need in that case. And it's there naturally. It happens in nature with native plants as well. You have that hybrid, but they can't exist really. They go back to their mother plants, and then maybe you have then at one other spot the hybrid effect again. But it's something that occurs naturally, and farmers like that. You get a better yield.
That's so cool. And then just so for folks that don't know, an heirloom variety is basically like a really old lineage, right? Yes. That has been, well protected through, I don't know, decades, and then is known for being like specifically a really great crop.
Yeah.
Right.
Even longer, even you can go 100 years back and longer.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Howard, do you have something to add?
There's an heirloom seed company called Mary's Heirloom Seeds. Are you familiar with it?
I think I've heard. I haven't ordered any seeds from them.
Yeah, I haven't either. I was wondering. I've recommended it though because I love her videos and she has some good educational materials. I've never used the seeds.
Well, if I do try it out, I will have to let you know and report back on how that goes. So thank you guys so much for sharing your vast experience and recommendations. you know, we talk about what are your top recommended resources for gardeners, and you guys definitely were one of those tonight. So we really do appreciate it. So it is time for us to talk about our upcoming webinar. So next week we have, we're going to meet with Doris Heitzman, who's the UF-IFAS agent. She's going to talk about Florida-friendly landscaping and give us an introduction to the topic. That is next Tuesday, the 23rd at 7 p.m. And Florida-friendly landscaping, if you're not familiar with it, is all about how to save Florida's precious resources, specifically water, save money, and have an attractive, low-maintenance yard. So tune in if you would like to hear from Doris next week. And then to learn more about our future webinars and to find a recording of this webinar, please visit myclearwater.com/bbn. We appreciate your comments, which you can send to me at my email, which is listed on the slide. That's sheridan.boyle@myclearwater.com. Johan and Howard, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've definitely learned quite a few things, and have taken down some notes as well. So we really appreciate you being here, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.